listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
This is the SexPharmD podcast with your host, Dr. Nadia Archambault, licensed clinical pharmacist and certified sex therapist. With a focus on women's sexual health and wellness, Dr. A is here to cover important health topics and answer all of your questions about subjects that can be applied to pharmacy practice. And now, here's Dr. A.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of SexPharmD. I have a fantastic pharmacist on for today, Dr. Jenna Quinn. Welcome to the show. I'm very, very happy to have you on and can't wait to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be on. Thank you, everybody, to be on a show called SexPharmD. Makes me blush a little bit. So I'm excited to really open up and talk about all the uncomfortable things.
That's right. That's right. I try to take everyone out of their comfort zone. So
love it. I can't wait.
So I'd love for you to just tell everyone, our listeners, a little bit about your background and what you're doing now, which is really unique and cool. I love it.
Thank you. So I am a pediatric pharmacist by trade, pediatric pharmacist in the hospital setting for 11 years now. So I am from New Jersey and I've been practicing locally in PA in New Jersey in various hospitals, CHOP and Cooper for over 11 years. Through that journey, I've also, I first should say, foremost, a mom of three.
Yes, that's the most important.
Yeah. Three beautiful, crazy little girls, Peyton, Hadley, and Avery. And so kids definitely push you into getting, creative with your job, to have that flexibility. So I was in the hospital for 11 years and I honestly loved it. I always rotated between the PICU, the NICU, the ER, Gen Peds. And so I liked that I had like a little bit of everything. Over those past 11 years, we would get in these really complex pediatric patients, whether that was from, various facilities in the area. We have like long-term care facilities. A lot of people aren't familiar with like them. When you think long-term care, you think geriatrics, but there's actually pediatric patients that stay in long-term care facilities. And then like rehabs, we would have kids come from home care. And so over the course, the United States doesn't have a good definition of what medically complex is. So I kind of adopted it from Europe, which is
wow.
Yeah, they don't. So if you look at the literature, like we don't have in the adults, we have like a better definition, but in kids, we don't have any wonderful literature to say, okay, what's medically complex? And so that is, in other places, not the US, it's greater than 2 chronic disease states and greater than 5 or more medications. And this is kind of the tipping point, and we do see this in geriatrics. Once they're at that 5 or more, and the one study that was in Europe, that usually there's a very high rate of medication errors, and if not medication, like blatant medication errors, that there's a large chance for med optimization. I call it to stay PC. And so we would get these complex kiddos, and I would always notice that there was like a little bit of tweaking I would like to do, whether that was, it could be something blatant like a drug-drug interaction, or it could be a missed dose. These kids, the unique thing about kids is that they grow so fast, they are constantly needing to weight adjust their medications. And sometimes they won't see the primary for like 6 months and they've gained a lot of weight. And at that point now the medication's subtherapeutic. And then, or it would be like, just working with the families, I would go in and they'd be like, his behaviors are still bad. So it was just, there was always ways to make the medication regimen better. And a lot of times I feel like in the outpatient world, a lot falls through the cracks as far as adverse drug reaction monitoring is one of the big ones I'm finding. For like, common sense things for a pharmacist.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if they're on an antipsychotic, they need, a cholesterol panel, an A1C. And, if they have a med that has a level, how often is that level being taken? So this one patient in particular 2 years ago really stuck with me. His medication regimen was horrifying to say it nicely. And so I worked with his mom after he was only in our PICU for a night. And I gave the mom my number and I worked with her for over 4 months. Obviously like at no charge, just because I was so bent out of shape about like how many things were incorrect in his regimen, ineffective. So through a combination of PGX and some collaboration with 3 of his subspecialists and his primary care, again, it took 4 months, but I was able to have him obviously like get rid of all the drug interactions. So like the one big thing was he was on his antipsychotic and his pulmonary meds interacted, which was causing him to need to be straight cast and causing urinary incontinence.
Wow.
So the first thing I did was take away one of his pulmonary meds with his pulmonary pulmonologist blessing, and he didn't need to be straight cast anymore. And then he was on duplicate antipsychotics. We rotated them, and then he was placed on one that actually worked. And so his behavior changes and he wasn't, hitting the nurse, the home care nurse that was coming. So again, it took a long time, and he was what we call my passion project. And
I love that though.
So after him, I was like, is this, this has to be happening to a lot of parents. And, who's out there in this outpatient world that's a clinical pharmacist and pediatric trained that's watching these kids. And the answer was nobody. So, they have that contact with the retail pharmacist, and we all know, I'm assuming a lot of you guys listening are retail pharmacists. You are amazing. You are completely overworked, and you don't no one could have the bandwidth in the retail setting to do an hour medication management. It's just not realistic. So those were the pharmacists that had, all their medications, and then they just had their primary who was too scared to touch their subspecialist medications. And so it just seemed like the perfect recipe for a clinical pharmacist to embed themselves. So I've been doing so in the community with medical daycares, long-term care, acute care. And my dream would be to honestly have the insurance company match me up with these medically complex pediatric patients. And I should add, through my journey in the NICU, as well as my own personal journey with maternal health, that I do a lot of maternal health. It's not like something I was specially trained in. It just organically happened over the years where I, from being in the NICU for 11 years, they'd be like, is this med safe? Can this mom still breastfeed? Can this mom take this med? And so maternal health is another near and dear thing to my heart. So between the two of them, I really made it my mission to have the fetal maternal patients who are complex, as well as the pediatric patients, to really have an advocate and a clinical pharmacist on board. And so I've also taken a lot of private pay patients, and it's crazy to see, because a lot of those two specialties, a lot of people are uncomfortable. And so, like I said, the pediatrician will have a subspecialist and they won't even touch their meds, even if they see a med error. And then the primary care sees that one of their patients is pregnant and, or trying to conceive. And instead of saying, why don't you talk to a fetal maternal medicine doc? I've had now like 3 or 4 women text me or call me hysterically crying, like, my doc's not going to give me my meds anymore. The PCP said if I continue my antipsychotic, antidepressant, whatever, they're going to that I have to change doctors who are not comfortable prescribing it to me. And so even if it's safe, so there's just that lack of knowledge and comfort with those patient populations, which I think like makes me love it even more because there's so much room for advocacy. So that's my long-winded.
Yeah. No, I love it. It's so important to know how people, I love hearing the stories of how people found what they're passionate about, like their why story. And I know as a pharmacist myself, I never wanted to touch the heavy duty pediatric meds aside from like amoxicillin in the retail setting, and I know a lot of us don't. So what you're doing is really amazing and very brave, because I know a lot of us just don't even want to go there. And it really is a specialty that requires, more training for sure, because you can't just go in and, and I think it's so important as far as the new moms with the breastfeeding, and there's so many questions that come up. And I know even like for pharmacists that I know, like in the retail setting, we'd have to look it up, and then it's always just refer to your OBGYN, and,
right.
And we just don't, we didn't have a lot of time necessarily to really dig deep. So I think that's great too, that you're having those conversations, because they are so important.
And I did, because I'm infamous for doing things that I'm like, I don't even know if this person's going to reach back. But I did reach out to Karen Lynch, who's the CEO of CVS, because
wow,
I would love, haven't heard back yet, but I'm determined to talk to this woman. For that reason, because I think you guys, it would improve the quality of care and your satisfaction as a pharmacist in the retail setting to say, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with this pediatric patient or really uncomfortable with this pregnant woman. Let me call Perfecting Peds and we can get you an answer. And I think so. My dream is really to have everyone have access to this as like a drug information source, as a pharmacist who's in, like you're saying, in the retail setting. You also see it in the hospital too. And those rural hospitals never see a pediatric patient or a complex maternal health. And they're like, what? So I'll let you know if Karen ever gets back.
Yeah, please do. Karen, if you're listening.
Yes, come on. I was like, a woman CEO, first of all, I love it. But
right.
I think, I think that would be huge to have the CVS pharmacist have a clinical pharmacist to refer to and work with as a liaison. And I think it would close a lot of the gaps, because like I said, it's not that they're quote unquote a bad pharmacist. Like we're all very educated with our doctorate, and we're all amazingly smart, and anal just goes with our
that's it.
with the territory. But I think it's like, if you told me I had to give like my family, there was 2 pharmacists, like give a whole family of vaccines, and me and my husband got 2 each, and then on top of it, get the phone calls, do the drive-through, like all that alone, it's just not feasible for them to be doing this clinical work. But I think if the retail pharmacists and clinical pharmacists work together, it'd be huge. And another big thing, this is again something I'm super passionate about, and I'm sure it happens in the adult population. Another big thing I do is, which is probably not nice to the parents who aren't compliant, but I do a lot of compliance checks. So I'll call like this retail pharmacy, whether that's whoever that retail, and I said, can you send me the fill list from January, for example? Through this, I found out one mom who has diagnosed Munchausen's because of medications that were on it. And then another was a possible diversion and wasn't. So you can find out a lot from like how frequently they refill their meds. And I think too, a lot of times we have these non-compliant patients, and what happens is we just add another med and we add another med.
Yeah, right.
Add another med. And so like in this one case in particular, like the parent wasn't giving their H2, wasn't giving their PPI, and the GI specialist was like, I don't know what to do. So added Bethanacol. added Reglan, and eventually needed to add erythro. And so, but they weren't compliant with just the H2 and the PPI. So again, I think there's a lot of ways that we could all service the population better if we had clinical pharmacists, not necessarily in peds and maternal health, but everywhere, right? For us to collaborate and really bridge those gaps of care.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that would be great.
That's my long-winded what I do.
I love it though. No, it's great. So as far as when you're talking with these new moms and, they're breastfeeding, part of what I've seen for women who are going through postpartum, they're experiencing low libido, how would they even want to be getting intimate with their partner when they're just completely exhausted? And then some of them have gone off of their antidepressants or other medications that they may need because they're breastfeeding. What are some common ones that you've seen as far as questions you've gotten from new moms who are breastfeeding and postpartum?
Yeah. So with my own personal journey, I always had panic attacks and anxiety since I've been 15. So can't quote if it was 16 or 17. And I don't know why looking back as a peds pharmacist, I'm not sure why they started me on this, but they started me on Effexor, was my first one that they started me on, and that worked. And so I've been on Effexor, I'm 33 now, since 17. And there has been points in my life where I've tried to come off it, and it's the worst idea possible. Because my panic attacks come back, and then I get agoraphobic, and it's very cyclical.
Oh, that's awful. Yeah.
So I just know that that's part of, and I'm very much into not just throwing meds at people. So, part of it's not that I just take Effexor. I have to work out at least 4 times a week. I do meditation. I, took my whole panel, and especially through my pregnancies, I needed B12 shots because I have celiac. So I try to do, I think when people see somebody on a med, they're like, oh, they must not be taking care of themselves, or
right. But you're doing all the other self-care things that you could possibly do. So, that's not an issue.
Right. And I do counsel, women, especially postpartum, you have to give the baby to your husband to sleep. You have to, once you get cleared, you even if you're not, you just have to take long walks. So when I take these private pay patients, I think when people hear me talk about medications, they're like, oh, she just wants to throw meds at kids and maternal health patients. And that's not the case. But there's a lot of things that go missing when postpartum, right? So you don't sleep, right? So sleep's a huge way to take care of yourself. And if you're breastfeeding, you're waking up every 2 to 3 hours, and that's what you're doing. And then on top of it, you don't have that coping mechanism of doing intense physical exercise, right? So you literally can't for 6 to 8 weeks, depending on if you had a vaginal or cesarean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a lot of your coping mechanisms are taken away. And then it's you have this alien of a baby just given to you, and they're they're yours. You're like, what?
Yeah, there you go.
And not a lot of, I told my sister-in-law this because she's right now in the thick of it, but a lot of women will tell you, you don't instantly bond with this baby. You're it's a very weird experience. You're just given to them and be okay, now feed them and don't sleep and don't work out and just be really happy for, the next, however they say postpartum is the first year. So a lot of women really struggle with the adjustment, and that's normal. We know it's 1 in 4 or have postpartum. And then I was so excited to hear that depression. And then they're going to start screening automatically for postpartum anxiety, which is
good.
Which is what I had. And I think, you get it screened maybe once at the pediatrician, once at the OB, but it's they do it at 6 weeks, which if you really look and think about the whole postpartum journey, they don't screen us enough, because a lot of women get it farther out, 2 months or 3 months, and it can be all the way up to a year. So I think we kind of, that in combination of that, we also put unrealistic work demands on women.
Mm-hmm.
Both of my second and my third child, I had to go back at 6 weeks postpartum.
That's too early.
Yeah, so I
No.
think it's insane, right? So
Yeah.
and then you expect them to breastfeed, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole nother thing. But through my journey of, my first with my daughter, I had my effexor was really low, like really, really low. I was able to like basically the starting dose. And so postpartum, like nobody gave me the heads up that like, if you're prone to anxiety, depression, OCD, that you have a high chance of relapse after postpartum. That's just the stats. It's like you're 2 or 3 times more likely to have postpartum, like a postpartum mental illness if you've had it before. And so
Oh, okay.
nobody tells you that. So
No.
I remember at like my 6th week, it's been almost 6 years now, so I can talk about it. But I called my dad, who's a counselor his whole life, and I was just hysterically crying because I had postpartum OCD, which is like where you have like intrusive thoughts, which is really scary to verbalize and to talk about. And so he actually took me to the ER, and they did like a workup and just like everything, because a lot of times women postpartum have thyroid issues, which you're talking about libido, that could be a huge
Yep, another one.
and so they were like, they did all the workup, and then they like actually got me in with the psychiatrist a couple of days later, which was huge. But then nobody said, like, I would have loved to say like, and I tell women who already have mental illness before, like there's a high likelihood it's going to happen. I think if you know that and you can make sure you have all your resources, then it's huge. So, and a lot of women don't know that your OB is actually the best person to start with if you have a crisis postpartum, because they are trained the most. So that brings into question, if you are in some sort of crisis or struggling with postpartum health, what's safe pregnancy wise. And so actually a lot of the SSRIs and SNRIs are safe. And it's weird because I always get the question, some are, now there's a caveat, like some of the I should say the most published and well-studied ones are Lexapro and Zoloft. So if you're going to new start on anything, whether that's during your pregnancy or after your pregnancy, those are the 2 go-to if you haven't tried them before, and you're, because a lot of times you fail those meds, right? So, but Effexor was for me personally a med that I knew worked. So I did my research, and it's similar. Effexor is not as well studied, but across the board, it can have, like they say, potential small gestational age, which is like a very low percentage, like a low chance. But in my mind, if you have anxiety or depression during pregnancy, you're at risk of having a small gestational baby, or even more so, you're really at risk for having a preemie. And so when women ask, like, should I treat my anxiety and depression or just kind of stick it out? Whether that's during the pregnancy, you're at risk of having a small gestational age or preemie. And then after, the bonding with your baby, you can't even do if you're anxious or depressed. So if you've tried, other things to cope with it, like I said, meditation's huge. That I think the biggest thing is after postpartum, you've gotten labs, it's not something like your thyroid or something else. And you want to start these meds that can be started safely. And so, like I said, Lexapro and Zoloft are easy ones, because if there are other options 100%, but even with Lexapro and Zoloft, it's monitoring the baby for lack of weight gain and any sort of which is hard to say colicky, but like sleeping pattern changes and stuff.
Okay.
Anecdotally, and just my personal experience, I haven't seen any women have those issues, but it is documented in the literature. So I do always say, risk benefit. If you're at a point where you're in a crisis, you get started, and God forbid you start breastfeeding and the baby's having, it's hard to obviously weed out other root cause that could be causing this, but if they have they're not gaining weight appropriately, or you notice like massive mood changes, then you would either do donor milk, which is quite popular now and a little bit easier to get, and then or formula. So I always tell moms that, like, by all means, you can do this safely. So I do advocate, and like I said, I haven't had any mom that's had to have come stop breastfeeding because of being on these medications. If anything, if you can lower the anxiety, the depression, the OCD, and really just enjoy bonding and breastfeeding with the baby, it's best for both of you. That being said, if you're a woman that's like, I absolutely hate this and it's awful for your mental health, then I don't want to push that any further, you know?
Right. No, that's really good to know, especially for our listeners, because I know, again, it's something that we just say, refer to your OB. And there are women that I've had, you know, that I've spoken to where they're having their baby go up for checkups and they go to the OB, you know, but they're not talking to their OB about how they're like mentally feeling. And I really believe that and then they just stop going. Like there are some women I'm like, okay, when's the last time you've been to get yourself checked? They're going for the baby all the time. You know, they're depressed, they're anxious.
And I think too, we really have to, with my OB, I even asked for my last one, like, can I do a telemedicine with you? Like, it's not like a mom of, because now this is my third, but a mom of 3 that's still, you know, maybe, I mean, the podcast is called SexMD, so you could talk about anything, but my vagina's still healing. So how am I like, I'm wearing diapers. How am I supposed to load myself, my 3 kids to go to the OB? But, you know, I think if we maximize telemedicine too, and I think there is, even like with my own psychiatrist, when I meet with her, when I'm in my environment, I can kind of be more myself, and she probably really sees everything, you know? But I think too, if we maybe did like a couple more checkups via telemedicine with OVs or like us, like, or, you know, a clinical pharmacist or even lactation consultants, now they have like all this, remote. Obviously, I think it's nice if they can go, but there's all these services that are available. And if we made more services available via like telemedicine, I think women would be more likely to do it because of how stressful it is in the beginning weeks just to get out of the house. And then I think they fall by the wayside. So if we had like a 3-month and a 6-month checkup, I think we'd be able to capture so many women that aren't okay that we just don't know, right? So we know 1 in 4 women suffer from postpartum depression. We don't screen for anxiety. We don't screen for OCD. And so I think, and we only screen them maybe once or twice. And I know personally, my PCP has forgotten to screen me almost every single time.
Probably, yeah.
And just,
so, you know.
There's so many women, and then it's like a shameful thing too. And then you're also talking about like libido too. There's so many other things, like your partnership too can suffer because they don't clear you for 6 to 8 weeks to even have sex. And then on top of it, you're so tired and you don't have any of your coping mechanisms. And then add on that you might need an antidepressant or anti-anxiety med. And so, and that can, I personally think that's killed my libido. For some people, like the antidepressants can decrease libido, but then for others, they actually women are on an antidepressant to increase libido. So it just depends on the person, you know, for sure. Yeah. And I think too, like talking to you, I was interested to hear what your thoughts or your tricks are, because like I said, I know you can add Wellbutrin potentially as like a synergistic to try to get their libido up, but I don't want to treat decrease libido with another potential serotonergic. Well, definitely it's a serotonin, like another drug that's going to add to, you know, your serotonin. And if I'm already have serotonin norepinephrine, I don't want to add more. But it is interesting, like you're saying, especially because I'm 6 months out now. So I kind of start to feel more like myself about 6 months out. And then at the year mark, I remember with both of my girls, this being my third, that I'm like, okay, I'm finally Jenna again. It does take a while.
See? Yeah.
And so it is, and it's like uncomfortable to tell your provider, like, I have no sex drive. Like I really, and so that and then like you're saying, depending on the person, if you start an antidepressant, that's going to suppress it even more. And then I always wonder if breastfeeding makes that worse or better. So I think all those play. And then when you wean breastfeeding, your hormones are changing again. And I think
that's the thing. Your hormones are like a roller coaster during that entire time.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
And I think, it is like an uncomfortable thing to be like, you're just trying to survive. And then if your libido is down, then you're definitely, your partner takes a hit too. And I think it's another thing that we don't talk about much. And like, as a woman, and a pharmacist and maternal health, I wouldn't even be able to tell you what you can do to increase your libido. So I would love to hear the tricks of your trade.
Yeah. I mean, for women that I've spoken with, the first thing is, okay, like, have you been checked out by your doctor? All of that. Okay. So if we take out, okay, they're on a med or not on a med or whatever it is. I think that you kind of almost forget how to be intimate. So the first thing that's important is, and I know it's tough if you have like a newborn, is to make sure that your partner's also on track with this, that you at least have some type of date night, just something, even if the baby's sleeping and you watch your favorite show on Netflix, or I like to have no screen time for a date night, where it's like dinner or you play a game, or some people like make a puzzle. It's just, everybody's different. But I think that,
not to cut you off, I think
no, it's fine. Yeah.
Too, like in the beginning, especially when you're breastfeeding, like that first like 3 weeks, it's so impossible to physically leave the baby because they tell you breastfeeding not to introduce a bottle for 3 or 4 weeks.
Right.
So you're like, well, shit, what am I going to do? Am I going to how am I supposed to spend time with my significant other without the baby if I literally am their life source? So that obviously can be a deal breaker for some women to breastfeed because they can't pump until like 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm somebody, the lactation consultants would kill me, but like you're saying, if it's for a mental health reason, pump a bottle.
Exactly.
One bottle.
I know.
I did it with all mine before that 4-week mark, because I just needed, like, whether it was sleep or working out. But I think, lactation consultants and a lot of people have your best interests in mind. But like you're saying, if you can't physically for your mental well-being, like, they're fine. You can introduce it a little bit earlier.
Yeah. Exactly.
But all these things come into play.
Yeah. And during COVID, when people didn't want to go out, I've gotten creative with couples and what they're going to do for like a date night in kind of thing. So,
I love that.
Yeah. So like date night in, or like dinner, and there's all different types of things you can do.
I love it.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then there's also just the power of touch. And, you don't, as women, like, we don't, after having a baby, a lot of women don't feel like them, like you were just saying. I feel like Jenna again. I think it's important for their partner to, I think, like, massage is huge. It doesn't have to be like you're going for a professional massage, but I think the power of touch and massage can be huge for the other person to do. And then I asked the question, well, because some women just don't even want to have sex, they just don't even want to have sex at all.
Also, your body image.
That's the thing too. Yeah. So that's why, like, that whole power of touch and just kind of feeling good again. And that's why exercise is important too, if you can, because then you start to feel, it's more of a mental thing too, where you start to feel like, okay, I'm back,
Yeah, I actually, this time around, because she's my third and she just slid out. I had no tears.
Yeah.
So I didn't need, and I was breastfeeding. I texted my OB. It's nice to be in the healthcare field, because I obviously knew my OB.
Yeah, exactly.
I worked with her. So I texted her, I'm like, would you hate if I started like slowly going into exercise? This is 3 weeks postpartum. She's like, no, you breastfed. You didn't have any tears. Yeah. You're probably, you're probably close to healed. She's like, you can go back. But that was huge for me, because that's one of my huge coping mechanisms just in general. So
absolutely. And then I've asked the question to women, as far as obviously they need to do, like, I think it's important, Kegel exercises, the Kegel balls they have even.
Yes.
But
yes.
I say, have you used your like a lot of women will have a vibrator, but some don't. But I've asked them, like, have you used your vibrator? Use that before you even think about, okay, well, I don't want to be bothered with sex, whatever. Go and have your time to yourself. Go and use your vibrator, and then it will make you feel
that
good.
was life-changing. In college, my two girlfriends took me shopping for a vibrator. I was like, they were like, "You don't have one?" I'm like, no. And it was like I was committing a mortal sin.
Yeah, but I think it's like, so, and there was one mom that I talked to, she's like, I didn't even think of that. I said, yeah, that will help you feel like yourself again on a sexual level, right? And then that will hopefully start to put you in the mood to wanting to have that intimacy again with your partner. And of course you have to wait, before you can do anything after having a baby physically.
Right.
But start doing that, and a lot of women don't even think to do, but it's something that has worked,
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Yeah.
I think that's huge. Yeah. I didn't realize that how amazing a vibrator could be until like
Exactly.
late in college. And it was like so uncomfortable. Me and my girlfriends were having a drink. They're like, "You never have one? You didn't know?" And I'm like, then once I found mine, I was like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And now I'm like, yeah, share it. I'm like, oh no, you need to have one, especially when it's hard to climax on antidepressants too. So I'm like, I always need a little help from a friend.
Exactly. I love that. I love the way you said that. Yeah, for sure. So that's another one. And then, I always say, some women, they're like, oh, I haven't even showered in like 2 days. I'm still in my pajamas. You know what? Try to take the 5-10 minutes out and just take a shower, dry your hair, put some makeup on, just something that makes you feel good about yourself. Like, so that way, like when your partner if your partner's there or comes home from work or whatever, you don't feel gross. You don't feel like, oh, like I'm still in my pajamas. Like, I don't want,
I know.
Try to just do something that makes you feel fresh during the day,
I know. And it's like a mom, you feel like guilty, but you can put your baby down. You can even put the video camera on and even if they're in their crib for 5 minutes on their back, just laying there, they're okay.
Right. Right. Because how you feel affects how they feel too. So it's important to put yourself first on some level, when the oxygen mask drops down in the on the airplane. They say, put it on you first. Right. Cause
it is so true though, because now my girls know, like with my working out, like my two older two, like you can come work out with me. It's fine. Because my 5-year-old, almost 6, likes to run. Like she's actually a really good runner.
Oh, that's cool.
So like that's something we do together, but she knows like it's non-negotiable for mom. So I either go or even if I'm doing a video or something in the house, my girls know like you can do it with me.
Yeah.
Like before I ask, do you want anything to eat? Do you want anything to drink? They'll play they'll play, but they know like either do it with me or play or do something like, somehow entertain yourself. Cause for the next 30-35 minutes, mom's not going to entertain me. And so it was really hard for me to get there and to set those boundaries and to be like, this is like a non-negotiable time for me. But now my girls know. And so it's nice. Even like if I have all 3 of them and I really feel anxious, I'll like the 2 will play, and then I can put my 6-month-old in the little like kids play gym that they have, the little like entertainment saucer, and I'm just like and I've learned like even if one's crying or losing their shit about something, I'm like mommy will be there in 20 minutes as long as everyone's healthy, like okay and safe. Like it's just like my non-negotiable time, and it took me a really long time to get there.
Yeah, no. And that's so important, and that's like conversations that I've had with women after they've had a baby, and that all plays into, your libido also, and your time with your partner and everything. And it's so important. The female sex organ is the brain.
Seriously.
So it starts here, so it's so important.
I wish we were as simple as men.
Yeah, I know. I know. Oh man. So as far as I know before we go, I want you to I love your website, perfectingpeds.com. I'm going to have everything in the show notes also.
Thank you so much.
It's a beautiful website, and
Thank
I
you.
think what you're doing is awesome. And I love that you've incorporated the whole talking with these new moms also, and the breastfeeding questions and things. I think that's going to be a whole new area. I think that I can see you even expanding more on that too, because there's not many people out there doing that.
And not many,
So.
yeah, and it's such a need. Like, even talking to my sister-in-law, like you just feel because she has 6 weeks, so she's a little bit, and it's her first. And so, I wish I had somebody in my journey to be like, it's okay. Like, it's common to feel like crap, absolute crap in the first 6 to 8 weeks. And it's really not fun to not sleep and
No.
to acclimate to getting to take care of somebody else. And so, I wish I had somebody to say, like, it's okay. You're not, like, you don't have rainbows shooting out of your butt. Like, you don't have to, like, it's going to be a process. It's going to be a journey. And if you had mental illness before, it could happen again. You need to have your resources available. Like, and so all those things, like when I did it the second and now the third time, and my husband's vasectomy just got denied by insurance. So that's fun. So I don't want to do it.
Oh my goodness.
So,
I mean, come on. That
so we can do a whole nother show on contraceptives, me and you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just knew, like, I had all my resources and ducks in a row, and I'm way more apt to ask people to help me, because the first time around I didn't. Like, I will ask somebody, I don't care, I'll pay, I have a wonderful babysitter or nanny. I'll pay her sometimes to sleep, to work out, sometimes I'll leave and I'll just go get like a massage or a facial. I get so much what I'm doing. But if my husband works long hours, so where I used to be like, I can't pay someone to go do that. Yes, you can. And so
yes, you can.
if I talk to somebody like a first time mom, or if I was talking to myself after my first, that's what I would want them to know. And that if you do have a crisis, your OB is the best place to start. And there are tons of safe options for you and your baby if you want to continue to breastfeed.
Yeah,
I breastfed all my girls for 2 years, and I was on a tester. And they're the chubbiest. This is not a funny joke, but it is a little bit. I would always say I had the happiest babies because they have a little bit extra serotonin.
Oh,
people would always be like, your kids are so happy. I'm like, yeah, they have a little extra serotonin. And I have the happiest kids. So, but yeah, so that was always my funny, not funny joke, but just to like make,
just make light of it. Yeah.
So there's tons of safe options, and just for women to know that. Doesn't make you a crappy mom if you need one of those.
Well, you kind of just answered I usually ask at the end, your top 3. So top 3 pieces of advice for expecting a new mom. So definitely take time for yourself.
Yes. If you have a crisis, it's normal, and you're not a crappy mom at all.
No.
And if you had mental health before, just there, you're a very high likelihood of having it again. And so just knowing that and getting your resources is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been wonderful. I really loved having you on. I feel like we could talk for another hour.
I know. Same.
So as far as where to find you, how to contact you, and again, we'll have this on the show notes, perfectingpeds.com.
Yep.
Any other social media or anything?
Yeah, my personal is Jenna Quinn, but then I also have all the social media. So Facebook page, Instagram, where my Instagram, I'm trying to, like, I just put honestly real life mom things. What I find as a pediatric pharmacist, like, for example, I just re-challenged my oldest with amoxicillin. She had an allergy, but I'll put like real life, or like my little one, like with her, just like tricks of the trade. I think mom should know like easy things like butt paste, or what's okay for them to have as far as even like nose drops, medication. So I try to put just like helpful things, like what, as a Peds pharmacist mom, that I know that I would want other women to know who aren't in the healthcare field on that. So that's more like kind of branded as to, non-healthcare, but then I always use LinkedIn too. Big on LinkedIn. So Jenna Quinn. And then I also have a Perfecting Peds page on there.
Great. I love LinkedIn. I feel like it's the Facebook for professionals.
Yeah, I love it. You know what? I didn't really get into it the first like couple months of my business. And my brother-in-law's like, you're a moron if you don't get on there and start like marketing yourself. And so I really have enjoyed my time, and like things like this, if I would never have the opportunity. And I honestly did not like other kids in pharmacy school because we're all like hyper and competitive. And so I have really come out the other way and really have been enjoying like collaborating with other pharmacists and
great.
Getting involved with like networks and associations. So that was like one of the surprise things I got out of being super involved in LinkedIn now, which surprised me.
No, I love it. I love it. That's why I found Todd for Pharmacy Podcast Network. We just randomly were, on LinkedIn. So it works.
It does.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.